Welcome to the Girlfriend God Podcast, a podcast in search of and in service to the divine feminine, bringing you an equal mix of academic research and emotional spiritual experience. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment. If you enjoy this podcast, share it with your friends, rate and review it if you're listening on a streaming platform. Follow on social media on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Now, let's get in the flow. Welcome to another episode of the Girlfriend God. Today, I'm happy to welcome Razena. Is it Unwin or Unwin? Unwin. Razena has been following the goddess path for several decades. She led a study group called Within Every Woman is a Goddess for several years and facilitated several goddess retreats that focused on the descent into the underworld. She also started a tarot group that morphed into a metaphysical study group that was active for many years. And she's also a certified Chakradance instructor. We'll have to talk about that, and you have to tell me what that is. For the past few years, she's stepped back from facilitating groups, and she's focused more on her own inner path by using the cycle of Venus and its correlation to the Descent of Inanna myth that she discovered by listening to Gary Caton's Goddess Astrology podcast in 2008. She's currently working on her 10th journey with Venus, each journey lasting approximately 19 months. Her way of working with the cycle has evolved over the years into her own unique process, though staying within the guidelines of the original story of Inanna's descent. And the sirens are still going off here. First, it was...
Mine are finished. Thanks for having me on, Kelly. This is an honor with all the people that you've had on your podcast. I'm like, oh, little me.
I'm really happy to have you on my show. I always feel like little me because I, the people that I have on the show have these long lists of accomplishments and certifications and PhDs. And I'm like, I'm just somebody who loves the goddess and likes to talk about the goddess and various different goddess spirituality paths. So I think first, let me ask about the Chakradance instructor, because I don't know what that is. And if I don't know what that is, there's probably people listening that don't know what that is.
Chakradance was a program started out by a woman in Australia that where you have obviously a group and you have music. All right, so you come in, you do a meditation. You either do all the chakras in one night, or it evolves into doing one chakra each night. Then you do meditation, and then there's music that you get up and move with. You allow your body, thinking about the chakra that you're working on, you focus your energy there, you allow it to speak out, and you dance and you move with the music. And then when you're done, 15, 20 minutes later, at least in the beginning classes, the later classes were a lot longer, you then would sit down and you would draw a mandala that would express what it was that you felt during that dance. And it's a way to connect with your chakras. It's a way to connect with where you have blockages. And it was an interesting time, a journey. I know when I first started doing it, 2014, it was in person. Now they've evolved where they do a lot of it where you can do the programs online. So if you went to Chakradance, I think it's chakradance.com. She's got a lot more programs that's going. I can't remember the girl that started it, the woman that started it. I can't remember her name, but it was very intriguing, and the women that did it really got a lot out of it.
Right.
But I started, I got caught up in it because of the Venus. I wanted to connect. It's the way I work. When I want to connect with something, like with my chakras, I teach it. I learn it
Right.
all so I can share it.
Right.
And then that way I learn more.
Right.
Um,
I get
so
that. I get
yeah.
that. Um, so in the Church of the Goddess, I'm offering a workshop in December called Six Steps to Cognizant Connection, because after the process that I went through to get to where I'm at in my relationship with the goddess, and then I wrote it all down so that I could teach it to other people. So
Right.
I get that. You do it yourself first so that you know what
Yeah.
you're talking about. I mean,
Yeah.
that makes
Yeah.
sense, right?
Yeah. And
Um,
then again, you don't learn it all until you're sharing it and getting an outside input from other beginners.
right,
I think
right,
sometimes you learn more from the beginners than you do the teachers.
right,
Because you learn from both, but it's like they present things in a way that's like, oh, I didn't think about it that way.
right,
So,
right.
you
That's
know,
why I
it's
love having people come on the show, because they give me different perspectives of stuff that I know about. And I go, oh, yeah, I never thought about it that way, right?
yeah, yeah.
So let's talk about the Venus and Inanna thing that you do first. And I will likely interrupt you with questions while you're talking. That's generally how it goes. Um, I did see that there, as you had told me, there's other information about other astrologers that are working on this connection as
Right.
well.
Right.
So give us a brief overview of, well, first, is the purpose of what you're doing is your own personal development, correct?
Correct. Correct. You know, getting to know the shadows, and that's a never ending process. Is diving deep. We project so much of our angst on other people,
Right,
and this is one way, the way that I have developed it for myself is it tells me the stories that I need to work on. And, you know, it doesn't always nice, it isn't always pretty, but it's like, okay, let's step back and look at this,
right.
and how is this me? What am I saying to myself?
So you would consider this work in the realm of shadow work?
Yes. Yes.
Always?
Um, Pretty much so. Especially the first half of the cycle, you're going in and you're uncovering things. And then the second half is reclaiming the things that you gave up when you went into the descent.
So
But
there's balance there.
yes, yes, yeah.
Gotta
And
have
that's
that.
that's the thing about Venus is the most balanced, symmetrical planet out there.
Right.
Um, that's what I wanted to. Um, I have some facts about Venus that are crazy that people don't know about.
Hit me.
Um, okay, so Venus orbits the sun in 224 days, Earth days. Now, when I talk about days, I'm talking Earth days. Um, Now, Venus is between us and the sun. So, of course, her orbit is less than ours. But when we talk about the Venus cycle, we're talking about Venus in relation to the Earth and Sun. So, the Venus, Sun, and Earth cycle is 584 days. Okay, about what does it say? 1.6 years, or 1.6 years. And what happens is when Venus goes around, and what they call in the middle of the retrograde cycle, Venus is conjunct the sun, is between us and the sun.
Right. I just
All
learned
right.
that that's what conjunct means.
Right. Okay. Now, because she's an interior planet, she has two conjunctions. One is on the far side of the sun, and one is on on our side of the sun,
Right.
during this 584 days. So
So that's like the northern and southern hemisphere.
kind of like that, yeah.
Okay.
Um, so when Venus has this in they call it inferior, I say interior, to make it so everybody understand, interior between us and the sun. So
Right.
when Venus has that interior conjunction, she has 5 of those in an 8-year period. Okay. And when
Okay.
she comes back 8 years later, she's only 1 to 2 degrees or 2 to 3 degrees away from where she was 8 years earlier.
Okay.
Now, she makes a 5-pointed star, the pentagram in the sky over this 8-year period.
Right.
Okay. Which is where I think a lot of the magical pentagram information comes from, is from Venus and what she does in the sky. Now, Venus's day is 243 Earth days.
Okay.
Okay. Now it correlates so that she only revolves once every 2/3 of a year. So she revolves exactly 12 times in an 8-year pentagonal period. And therefore she shows the same side of her planet to us, the same side every 8 years, the way that it works out. It's
Okay.
there's a lot more with her balance is the 3/5 harmonic in the musical. It's the music that is the most harmonious to us our ear. This is how her cycles work with in her revolving and synodic cycles, which is from start to from one side to the other. Now, with this 584 day cycle, Venus spends about, I think it's 40 days in retrograde. Okay. And in the middle of that, she's conjunct. Now, some of the teachings for the astrology of working with Venus in the cycle say that when Venus comes through her retrograde and she starts rising before the sun, which is the morning star, it's usually at 10 degrees away from that midpoint. And they say that's the start of the synodic cycle. I kind of, the conjunction to me is where we start. The conjunction is one of the major power points for me, because like this particular Venus cycle, in parts of the world, like in Australia, one day she was evening star, she was gone one night, and the next day she was morning star. She was visible because of the angle of the earth and her
Right.
declination. She was visible right away. So start at that conjunction point. So after she and she continues on, I think, for another 10 or 15 days of retrograde, and then she starts rising high before the sun comes up. So she's a morning star. And when she reaches her peak, which is about usually a month, I think it's a month, I don't have the date right now, but about a month and a half later, she's at the highest point. Now, from our vantage point, Venus, the highest she gets from away from the sun is about 47, 48 degrees. And then, okay, she gets up there. And then after that, and this is where the Inanna story comes in, she has approximately 7 to 8 lunar conjunctions, Venus and the moon coming together, usually 7. Occasionally it's a weird year and she has the 8th. And that would correlate to the 7 gates that Inanna goes through as she's descending. And what's happening at that point is Venus is approaching, she's going to start going to the far side of the sun. So it looks like she's descending, she appears from our vantage point to be getting closer to us, but she's actually going around to the other side of the sun. But
Right.
because from the way we view it, she looks closer until she gets to the point where she goes through the seventh conjunction. Then she disappears from sight for about 60 to 90 days, depending again on the year.
And
And
what time of the year is that? When is that?
that's it, it's about 8 months after her conjunction. So
Okay.
it doesn't tie in with our calendar. She has her own special cycle. So it's about 8 months, because you go through the 7 months. You've got a month of her rising in the sky, then you've got 7 months of going through the gates, and then she'll spend 2 months on the far side of the sun where she's not visible, and that's when she's visiting Erishkigal. And at the midpoint is when, what I call, at the conjunction on the far side of the sun, which is, okay, you have the conjunction when she's retrograde. That's when she's closest to the sun. You have the conjunction when she's moving forward. That's when she's on the far side of the sun. That's when she's hanging on the hook, where Erishkigal has put her to death. And it's like around that point, you have your ceremonial, where the two little beings that sprinkle that wine with Erishkigal, that talk Erishkigal and letting her have Inanna come back to life. And then she rises out of the underworld and then goes through 7 or 8 conjunctions with the moon as evening star. And she'll get brighter and brighter and brighter until she's at her high point. And then we'll sink real fast after that 7 months to come back down to restart, because as she comes around the planet, around the sun, she appears to be coming closer to us. And then she goes retrograde and starts the whole cycle again.
Right. I have questions.
Go for it. Go for it.
So I'm wondering if you could, because not everybody, I assume that people that listen to the Girlfriend God are familiar with the myth of Inanna.
Right. But not everybody.
But just in case they're not, can you just
Sure.
summarize that
Yes.
for
Yes.
us?
Yes. Yeah. That was next on my list.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Inanna hears the call to go to the underworld to visit her sister Erishkigal, who is queen of the underworld.
Right.
Whether it is her, I think I read where it's because Erishkigal's mate or husband was dead, so she wanted to go and honor her sister because he was dead, or whether it was because she wanted to be, Erishkigal thinks she's coming down to take over her realm. But
got it.
Inanna gathers her 7 May that she had gotten from her grandfather, or 7 of the May, which are the symbols of power. So she gets all dolled up, and there's what she has. Oh, let me find the list. Anyway, she has seven pieces of power, a crown, a necklace, a chest plate, rod, that the symbol of power in her hand, and so on. So there's 7 pieces. So she goes through, and when Erishkigal finds out she's coming down, she tells her minions, okay, don't let her in, make her take something, give me something, and have her come through the 7 gates. So she starts going down to the underworld. She goes through the first gate, gives up her crown. So we start at the crown chakra, because they have correlated these to the chakras, the 7 major chakras that most people use. Okay. So she starts out the first one, and they're like, she's like, I don't have to give this up. And they're like, yes, this is the way you need to give it up. So she gives up her crown chakra, and that's at the Venus moon conjunction. And then she goes through each gate, giving up a piece of her regalia. When she gets into the underworld, and it's like, you get into the underworld, nobody gets out alive.
Right.
So they declare her guilty, and there's a trial of something with Ereshkigal's priests, and they condemn her to death, and Ereshkigal hangs her on a hook to die. Now, before Inanna went into the underworld, she told her maidservant Ninshabar, okay, if I don't come back, get a hold of my grandfather or somebody. So Ninshabar had to run around trying to find somebody to help. And finally there was, I think it was her grandfather, fashioned two little beings out from the dirt of his fingernails, and told them to go into the underworld. They were like little fly type things, and go to Ereshkigal. And when she whines and cries about how horrible her life is, you agree. You just say, yes, your life is really bad. So they go in there, they do that, they make Ereshkigal happy. The point being that when you're complaining about your life, or you have all of these wounds and these things, if someone just listens and commiserates with you, you feel better. So then she tells the little beings that she'll give them anything that they want, and they're like, we want we want Inanna. So then they put Inanna, they have something, 60 days of they sprinkle things on her, the elixir of life on her for 60 days. And then she comes back to life. And then she rises out of the underworld and goes through the 7 gates, taking back a piece of her regalia as she goes through each gate. The story continues where, she ends up sending her husband, the king Dumuzi, into the underworld, but that isn't part of the Venus cycle, so there's more to the myth, but they didn't include that in the Venus cycle, those that put it together. But that's basically it. Is that clear? Did I get that?
Yeah. So yeah. I've actually been talking to a friend a lot lately about Inanna, because so my understanding of Inanna is, well, Inanna and Ishtar, that's the same goddess, but Inanna is one of the earliest recorded names for the goddess in ancient Sumeria.
Right.
So I think when you're looking for different words to call the goddess, I think Inanna is as close as you can get to her original name. I mean, the goddess is the goddess of 10,000 names, right? We don't, use all these different names. And if you've listened to my podcast, you know my theory about the diamond head god, right? That there's the goddess, and then all other goddesses are just facets of her. But from what I know, Inanna is like the OG goddess, right? The primeval goddess. That's my understanding. Is that your understanding as well?
Right. My feeling, okay, with Inanna, especially because of where this story came from, with the Venus connection to Inanna, I'm wondering if Venus, the star, because she is the third brightest entity in the sky, that if that is the goddess, when you have a lot of the mythologies out there, that you've got the earth goddess, which is about eating, survival, anything that's related to your earth goddess for the hunter, then you've got the moon, because the moon and women's cycles were tied together before we have all the electronics and everything that pulls us away. They were all in cycle with the moon. And then you've got this bright star in the sky. And with Inanna being a star, in the sky.
Sorry, I don't know why my camera's doing something weird. I keep blipping out. I'm not sure why, but we're just going to go with that. It's probably because we're talking about
too much energy here. Okay. But I agree that, all of this, ties into that sacred feminine of recognizing. And I think with Inanna, because, what did they have to do back then but to look at the sky, and they saw this bright star. And and a lot of societies didn't see Venus as one star. They saw it as two stars, because as the morning star and the evening star, she's in different parts of the sky. So is she the
Right.
same? But they understood it enough that they made it into, they knew it was one star. Now, with tying, I want to talk about how Daniel Giamario of the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School. There was a book by Clyde Hostetter, Star Trek to Hawaii. And he found these dishes, pottery pots that had all these markings on it. And he started seeing similar markings in the Middle East to the Polynesian islands, and there was a huge ocean in between. And how did they have the similar things?
Right.
Well, he started looking at these dots and triangles, and he came to the conclusion, and apparently it worked out, where it was either the eclipse cycle. There were some of them were the eclipse cycle, and some of them were the cycle of Venus. So with Inanna being the bright star in the sky that they made up stories, yeah, she was a primordial goddess, of the first one that they used for storytelling in my head.
Right. So another question. So why is Venus retrograde? Like, what is it about Venus that, I mean, you can ask 9 out of 10 people and they're going to tell you they know something about how their technology gets all fucked up during the Venus retrograde. I mean, all the planets go retrograde at some point. So, what is it about Venus that makes her so known in our everyday kind of popular culture? I mean, there's not a right answer for that.
It's
I
the
just want to
power
know what
of
you
the
think.
word. It's the power of the word, because she never does actually go backwards. It's just from the way that we look. I have a special feeling about the retrogrades, because I think it's much ado about nothing. Um,
Oh,
the
okay.
the 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 more you talk about it, the more people believe in it, the more it happens. When
Right.
you
I
focus
get
on
that. That's
something,
the law of
it
attraction.
happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because Venus retrograde, I mean, retrograde to me is about going in for, the remembering, looking at things. It isn't, I have just as much electronic failure in Mercury retrograde as I do outside of Mercury retrograde. It just, we're focused on it at that
Right.
point. And we can use that as an excuse. That's my viewpoint. And I know there are a lot of people out there who would tell me that I'm full of hooey. But it's just especially for Venus and Mercury, because they're between us and the sun. When they go retrograde, they are between us. So is there a magnetic pull? Not because they're retrograde, but because they're closer to us than they
Right.
are at any other point in their cycle. And
That makes
that's why um things might, because the moon causes, the full moon, will cause disruption in the flow, the moon transits. So especially like with the tides. So it would make sense that Mercury and Venus would cause similar situations. Yeah.
I've just wondered why that is the planet that kind of rose to fame in popular culture over all others, other than because she is a representative of the goddess. But there are other, I don't know, it's just interesting to me.
Yeah, it's those.
I like to know when things rose to prominence. Like, at what point in our history did we start talking about Venus retrograde all the time? You know what I
Probably.
mean? Because I see that, I see those things kind of catch on with goddess spirituality, right? Like, I remember when nobody knew who Hecate was. Now she's everywhere. You know what I mean? It's like as soon as, like, anytime we step outside the Greco-Roman pantheon, a goddess will appear on the scene, right? And then she's everywhere. The next thing you know, like when it happened with Hecate, then she was a main character in, the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, the Teenage Witch, and then all this popular culture arose around these goddesses, and I just think, how does that happen? How does that happen?
I think it's the collective unconscious.
Yeah.
Once it gets brought out, that's my feeling. Um,
I think you're right. I think different
it's
goddesses come to us at different times because those are the goddesses that we need.
the more of us that get together and work with this energy, the more of us that get together and study it, it gets released into um, something that I've started working with is the DNA, because there's so much junk DNA. I've read this in different books. It's not me, but
Right, right,
in my studies. And there's so much junk DNA, and they don't know what it's for. Well, there was an author whose name I can't remember. I think it was a channeled work, but it made sense to me. And how that's okay. Erda happens to be one of the goddesses that I'm using with this journey, which we go into. But she's the goddess, the Norse goddess of the past that takes care of the well of memory. The well of memory, to me, okay, is the DNA. It's within that DNA. Now, there's another book that's coming out that somebody wrote about and one of the blogs, and I ordered it, but it talks about all of this space that's around us, that is actually, our science doesn't know how to measure it, but it's actually full of the ether. The ether, I think, is another word that he was using, but
right,
it's full of all of this communication. When you think about how in the air around us we have all this electronic signals, all the
right.
Wi-Fi, well, there's other information there too. So when somebody starts studying something and other people get into that and tap into a similar energy, I think it fills that well of memory and things come out. And then all of a sudden, it starts triggering memories in everybody. And
Right.
they're like, oh, okay. And we can only digest it with as much of the knowledge that we already have conscious. So, okay, we have the goddess energy and the Venus retrograde. Okay, so we're going to talk about Venus retrograde.
Okay.
I see. I guess maybe I tune out the Venus retrograde because all I hear is Mercury retrograde. Um, but again, Venus retrograde just happened, so that's a little bit more on the out. But and again, I don't see it as a negative.
Right.
It's she's bringing the information in. It's like when you have things go wrong, instead of getting upset because it goes wrong, if we were to turn that and to say, okay, why is that triggering my psyche right now? Why is that bothering my computer isn't working, or this relationship ended? She's bringing attention to that for us. So we need to step back and say, okay, reevaluate what your tie is to this incident. What
Right.
is really behind it? And I think that's the good thing, to use the retrograde points, is to do that. But again, it's like everyone's focus is on there, so it comes up, it bubbles up to the surface.
Right.
And I think we are much more connected than anybody wants to believe.
Oh,
you
I
know
totally believe that. I belong to this Discord server from somebody who's I belong to their Patreon, and we talk about that all the time. That because I mean, that's one of my core spiritual beliefs is that we really are all connected. There's only one of us here,
Right.
right? We really are connected by this kind of mycelium, kind of like how all the trees are connected by their roots underground. It's like that. We're just above ground.
Right.
And those connections are through energy. Like back in the 90s, everybody was all about the aura, right? Nobody really talks about aura anymore. People aren't offering services to read your aura. But I remember when like that was it. That was the thing, right?
Right.
And I do think there's something to that. I also personally believe that that is what we are headed toward in this, because I also think that we are all in an evolution of consciousness, right, as a human
Right.
race. And that is the awareness that we're headed toward, right? That we are at the precipice of ending a separation mentality, which is what we've had for hundreds of years.
Right.
This illusion that we are separate. I think that we are becoming conscious of the fact that that is not true.
Right. Enough
And
of
this is
us
a
are.
whole
And
this is this thing about consciousness and the evolution of consciousness. That's a whole other rabbit hole we could go down.
yeah.
But you said there was something else that you wanted to talk about. Well, you said there were other things that you wanted to talk about.
Okay, my brain is gone blank.
See, we swerved
Yeah,
into the
yeah,
consciousness.
yeah. Okay, let's go back to the Venus, the Inanna correlation. All right.
And Venus is what's considered a benefic planet, right?
Right. By some. That's the Greco-Roman stuff. You know, you've got
Okay.
the Mayans, I pronounce it wrong. She's a war god. I mean, he for them, they have two names, one for the morning star, one for the evening star, and they're war gods. When it's a morning star, I think it's Quetzalcoatl is I don't remember which one he is, but that's a war god. You know, where when Venus is a morning star, there's going to be war. They knew there would be war. You know, that's the time of the cycle when there's war. But again, societies. But Venus, you know, I guess, you know, because I know all of they talk about Venus being love and balance and harmony and like you say, the beneficent, you know, good things. But you know, going into the underworld isn't good things. It is at the end of the story,
Right.
but you got to go through the trials first.
Right.
And so, which would be the morning star. The morning star is when you're going into the underworld. When you're coming out of the underworld, it is usually you're picking up pieces and putting yourself back together and finding your power so that you can rise as queen of heaven and earth, at the very highest point of the evening sky. So yeah, again, it depends on her cycles. And see, that's the thing with astrology, and a lot of the astrology that's most of the astrology that people that aren't astrologers pay attention to is where is my Venus, what sign is she in, what house is she in. But there's also, you know, or all the planets, there's also the cycle, because just like you have your the moon, you know, whether you have a full moon or a waning moon or a waxing moon or a new moon, you've got that with all of the planets too. And that affects how powerful your Venus is in your chart. Where was she? What was her star point?
Right.
What was the energy when she started her cycle? That's part of the seed that takes care of you, that feeds your story. Yeah, I could go on.
So is there something that happens with, so Venus's cycle is every, what did you
19
say?
months,
Every
about
19
19 months.
Okay. I was just thinking about my other astrologer friend always talks about my Saturn return, but that's a much longer
That's
cycle.
29 years.
Right.
That's 29 years. So, and there are correlations between the different planets and returns, which I don't have under my fingertips right now, but I know Gary has talked about it on his podcast, where, when Venus and Mars have a cycle, it's, I don't know if it's Venus or if it's Mercury, where every 13 years they connect. They're all the planets have cycles like that where
Right.
several of them will come back together at the same spot, the same area, every so many years. But the Venus cycle is 18 and 19 months, somewhere right in there. And it comes back. You have a return every 8 years. So if you look at 8, 16, 24, 32, you're going to have the similar message, but like a higher octave than you did the 8 years before, because Venus is going to be in the same spot. And again, it's in the same area of your chart. So like, let's see, 64, 56, I think 56, when you hit 56, you'll have your next Venus return, where she'll be at the same spot she was in your birth chart. And then you're gonna, it's uncanny if you were to sit down and just write the high points down of those years, and sit with it, you'll find an echo of similar themes that happen during, right. and actually at any point, if you go back, like you talked about your Saturn return, you go back 29 years, or even 7 years, just over 7 years, 14 and a half years, and 21 years, you're going to find echoes as the 4 points of the Saturn, in relation to your birth Saturn. It's going to be the same thing for Venus. Is if, you have this big event that happens on this particular date, if you go back 8 years, there's something similar, because if it's triggering something in your chart now, it triggered something 8 years before that too.
Right.
And so it's that, it's intriguing when you start, working with Venus, to me is incredible, because there's so many different ways, well, any of the astrology, but there's so many different ways to work with her. And it's more than just, my Venus is in Libra in the 5th house. There's more than that. My Venus is a Cancer star point. Ariel Gutman wrote a book called The Venus Star Point, and she talks about what the meaning is behind each star point, which is, the energy, the guide works for your Venus through the next 19 months. And I have a Cancer. I'm one of the last Cancer Venus star points, before she switched into Gemini. And, the caring, the crabby person, the caring, that just as much as my Venus Libra stimulates my Venus, so does that Cancer. And, which I think is all part of the reason why I work with Venus so much, because my rising sign is actually the same within a degree of my Venus star point. So it's like, I was born to work with Venus. So give me another question. I'm losing my mind.
Well, so I gave you my information so you could look at my chart.
Right.
So where is Venus?
So you are a Scorpio star point. Your Venus is a Scorpio star point, and you were born just after Venus as a high point as evening star. So it was right between the third eye and just 2 days before the crown chakra gate, when she is at her highest, brightest. She is queen of heaven and earth at that point. And that's to me, that's kind of like where the end of the cycle is she's up there and she says, I got it all. I've taken all my pieces back.
Right.
And, I am the goddess. And that's where you were, at this point of the cycle where you were born.
That's
so
interesting.
yeah, so it's the priestess, it's the high priestess. It's not just the priestess, it's the high priestess. Yeah, so it's, but the Scorpio, you've got the scorpionic energy is what guides your Venus, which guides your divine feminine, looking into exploring the depths. It's a double underworld thing, not only, with your wanting to get into the depths and find out more about the deep dark part of the goddess. That's the way I would take it, knowing
Which I've
for both.
done.
Yeah.
Right. And I've done a tremendous amount of shadow work. I seem to cycle with shadow work as
Yeah.
well, which I'm sure has everything to do with my chart. This is actually a very interesting time of the year for me. I always, as we move into, and there's not really fall anymore. There's, especially here, right in the Midwest, there's 6 months of winter and 6 months of hot. But that little window, that October, when you can start to smell when the leaves are falling, and just that kind of fall feeling, because I'm 52, so I grew up with actual changes in the seasons that we used to have. And fall has just always resonated with me. I mean, I was born in the spring, my birthday's in the spring. But there was something about fall that causes great change in me. And I'm sure that has something to do with my chart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I didn't remember all the other, I know I wrote down the notes of the Venus cycle, but I did, but I don't have them with me, with the different parts. But yeah, it's yeah, with that scorpionic energy, it's diving into that, like you just said, and I'm sure there's other things. I can't remember what else you had over there. But yeah.
I can never retain any of this information from my friend Rachel. She tells me stuff all the time, and I just don't. I don't know how you guys remember this stuff. Astrology
It's
is
like
so
learning.
big. It's so
Yes.
big.
It's like learning another language. I have one of my
Yes.
dearest friends. He'll look over my shoulder when I'm looking at a chart, and he says, "All I see are squiggles. How can?" And I'm talking away, and he says, "How do you get that out of there?" And it's like, and there's
I just
so many.
the only thing I remember is that I have a grand fire trine in my chart.
Okay, that's um, the active principle. Trines sometimes just happen, and they're
Right.
not always good because you get lazy.
I mean, for me, that speaks to, so I have often said that I'm fire incarnate. Like I am just, it's not just that I'm a fire sign. I am always drawn to air and water signs as my friends, as my partner, right? My partner's a Gemini. Um, because I need those people in my life to kind of tamp me, because if I don't have that influence, I will burn through everything and everyone. I have, when I am passionate about something, watch out. I don't, you know what I mean? Nobody craves connection more than I do. The relationships I have are all intense and intimate. And you know what I mean? It's always fire. I am driven by fire as my element.
Yeah, that could have to do with where your Mars is too, which I don't remember. Let me see. I don't want to lose you. Let me see here if I can minimize this. There. Okay. No, I lost you.
Go ahead. And then I have another question.
Now your Venus and Mars are conjunct. your Venus and Mars are together. Of course, they're in Gemini, which is your connection to the air. You have Mercury, Chiron, Vesta in Aries, your fire. Who's the other? Let's see, Leo. Your South Node is in Leo, which is a fire with Ceres. And then your Neptune is in a fiery planet. That's your grand trine. The one thing that I thought was interesting for you is you've got Asclepios, the asteroid Asclepios, which I could go into that, how I work that with my Venus stuff too, is conjunct your sun. So that's the healer. You know, Asclepios is the dream healer, and that's conjunct your sun in Aries, which would magnify, you know, that fiery energy. So you've got a lot of fire energy in your chart.
I mean, it took a long time. It took a long time for me to learn how to accept myself as that, and that is who I am and who I was meant to be, and stop apologizing for it, right? Because I've tripped over a lot of people in my life who've told me that I'm too something or other, too intense, too needy, too whatever. Not too anything. You know what I mean? And if you're experiencing me that way, that's your stuff.
Right.
Exactly. Your reaction to me is about you. That's not about me. That's about you. But so I'm not the right person for people who are just learning about themselves or just learning about what friendship really means and what relationships are about. Like, I'm not a beginner friend. You know what I mean? Like, you gotta have some knowledge of yourself to be in my kind of orbit. I know that sounds egotistical, but it's not. It's just that I know myself and I know who I resonate with. You know what I mean?
It's your opposition. The sun and Lilith, Black Moon Lilith, oppose each other. So that's what you're going to bring out in other people, are their shadows.
Right.
You know, and again, so that's something that you know, exactly what you just said. That's in your chart, and that's in your personality.
Right.
You just can't. It's just who you are, like you say. But I want to touch back, because this is something that I'm passionate about, and I don't want to miss it.
And then remind me that I have a question.
Okay. I brought up the Asclepios. When I do, because I've done this journey, well, I've worked with it for 10 cycles, but there's been 5 cycles that this is the fifth in a row that I have worked in my own way, where there's thousands of asteroids out there, and I've taken a list of, I'm up to now over 500 asteroids that are related to deities or strong mythological figures that carry weight in our societies now. And I have worked up a program, you know, so that I know what deities are going to be with me at each, what I call the power points, the highest point in the sky, each of the conjunctions, and the lunar Venus conjunctions.
Yeah. So asteroids are getting a lot of play in astrology these days, right?
Right. Because they're the stories. You know, it adds a layer of flavor. You know, they're being discovered, and as they be discovered, you know, and that's another thing, is some of these asteroids get discovered and they get named. All of a sudden, that energy then flows into the earth, that flows into the collective consciousness,
because we've acknowledged it.
Right. And at the Venus high point in June 4th of this year, Rhea, the goddess Rhea, her asteroid, was conjunct Venus. Rhea is the wife of Cronus, which is Saturn, and Rhea is, I think, Ops is the name. She's also Cabelli, which I always said was Sybil, but I heard on one of your podcasts it's called
Cabelli. It's Cabelli.
Yeah, they're the same goddess energy, and she's the one that had Okay, Cronus swallowed all her kids because he knew someone was going to kill him, until she got to Jupiter, and then she hid Jupiter away, and then Jupiter eventually got Cronus to disgorge all his siblings. So the story behind Rhea is she will help uncover parts of ourselves that we've hidden away. Kronos being Saturn, being this is how it should be, that the dark side of Saturn is the patriarchal, the things that have made us swallow and hide the shadows inside. And then Rhea finds a way, by saving her last child, to who comes forth and helps us bring these shadows out, all of these hidden gifts, all of these hidden parts of ourselves out. So that's the story that I took for this upcoming cycle. Now, when she went retrograde at that point, she was conjunct Lilith. Now, Lilith, which I know you've talked about too on some of your podcasts, Lilith was part of the Inanna story before she was part of the, I think, timeline, before she was part of the Adam and Eve story. She was in the Halupu tree. This Lilith was hiding away in the tree, which I had read, and I don't know where I saw it at, but Lilith was a priestess of Inanna. Lilith was, and that's when the patriarchal side of things took over Inanna's story. They made Lilith into a bad guy, pushed her away. That was the priestess society, according to this one author. So, but Lilith was with Venus.
I wish I knew who that was, so we could put it in the show notes.
Yeah, I'll have to find it out.
I was going to say, could you at some point?
I have it somewhere on my computer because I save everything. I have so much, but I'll find that.
Well, we did mention quite a few references during this show, so I'll have to go back and make a list, because I like to put it in the show notes in case people want to learn more about that particular thing or read that book, or
I can send you a list, because I have it all here.
Okay.
In fact, I made a list. It's handwritten. But so anyway, Lilith was conjunct Venus at the point of retrograde. Okay. Now, at the same time, with astrology, there's different ways to work with, you've got so many degrees, everybody's in, Libra 23 or whatever. But there's also the declination north and south of the ecliptic that is similar to the conjunction. And Pluto happened to be with Venus in the declination at I think that might have been at the high point. But at the time of the retrograde, there was also in the sky, the sun was opposing Pluto, squaring the nodes, which a lot of astrologers went, it's the turning of the age. It's a huge, the kids that are born at that point during that time period will make huge changes in the planet. There was a whole big thing, but it was happening at the same time that Venus went retrograde. So Lilith plays a huge part in this upcoming cycle. And then, which is working with shadows. It's working with, she's about the parts of yourself that you've hidden away. And it's like, no, I'm coming out. I want to talk about this now. I want to get it out. I'm not going to be hidden away. Well, then when we get to the point of the retrograde conjunction with the sun, Rhea happens to be back there. And that's when she's with Erda, who is, the Norn of the past, but also the asteroid DNA is there, which I'd forgotten. I had put down Erda and Rhea, and then I had done this work and connected with the DNA book that I had picked up, where this guy had channeled about what the DNA was really about. So I'm like, the well of memory, DNA, to me, it was when you remember things and honor, because the well of memory is what waters the tree of life. and honoring the memories, remembering the past. And then to find out that the asteroid DNA was right there too. It's all about all of this stuff from the past coming out. And when you sent me a Instagram or TikTok about them finding the
Right,
mosaic of Medusa, there was a temple of Aphrodite and a statue of Hecate, all found during the Venus retrograde. It's like the past is coming out. So
right,
it's like this upcoming cycle is about things from the past coming out, gifts that you have hidden away because your family says this is not what you're supposed to do, or society has said this is not what you're supposed to do. It's time to let those things come out and honor them and live with them in a way that shows your authentic self.
right. I see
That's
that. I see that as a theme that's in that collective consciousness. Living authentically has become kind of our highest goal,
right,
right? To just be who we are
right,
and integrate. I always, when I talk to people about shadow work, I always say, the whole point of that is to understand that you cannot outrun the things about yourself that you don't like. If you want to be content, or dare I say happy, or at least relatively satisfied in this life, you have to do the shadow work so that you can learn how to befriend those things and
right,
how to integrate them into yourself, because we also need balance, right? Our
right,
bodies need balance, our spirit needs balance too. It's just like with the whole, stop thinking about masculine and feminine as gender and think of them about just attributes instead, because we all have both of those things. So does every
yes,
energy, so does every planet, so does every goddess. So,
right,
it's about the integration. And I don't know
and
about you, but that's what has happened over several years in my spiritual life, right? Is doing
right,
that really hard shadow work that no, and I understand why people don't want to do it. It's hard.
yeah.
But the reward it is so priceless.
And when you
You
get to
gotta
the
do
end,
it. And you
when you
come
get
out
to the end,
better.
yeah,
You
yeah.
come out
And see,
better.
that's where this Inanna Venus correlation, how it comes in, because now the first gate, the crown chakra gate, is October 10th, which will be just before this is aired. But so this month is about looking at your shadow in relation to your crown chakra. And if you use this formula, it helps you know what you need to work on. Because sometimes when you look at your shadows and it all comes up, it's like, no, I'm going to run away because it's
Right.
too much. But if you start breaking it down, like each chakra or each, at each gate, depending on where it is, if you're into astrology and you know what house it is in your chart, and you can look at that and say, okay, so this is the area that I'm going to work on for this month, that I
Right.
need to give something up and recognize that whatever is being triggered is something I no longer need and I have to give it up. I need to
Right.
give it away. I need to let it go. And then, the next lunar gate, then okay, now go into the next chakra. But this way it gives you a template to work with. And you've got a month, to mull it over and see what's happening in the outside world around you. All of that is a message to you. Anything that triggers your attention is a message to you, that if you sit in meditation and contemplation and clear this intention, this is, I want to understand what's going on, that helps work with your shadow. And I think that's where, we're always going to have shadows, whether we're working on our shadows, whether we're working on our family genetic shadows, that, because a lot of our shadows aren't ours. Stuff that gets triggered in me, it's like, I haven't had anything in my lifetime, but
Right.
it's something within the makeup of me that I need to go, okay, that's not mine.
Right.
So much of what we carry is not ours to start out with.
Right.
We need to let go. And this gives us a process, because as humans, you'd love to be able to wave the magic wand and say, I'm fixed, but we don't work that way. We carry on, we hang
Right.
on, the wounds. The people that I know anyway, that's our it's our treasure. Our wounds are what we carry in front of us to show
Right.
who we
Right.
are. And it's
Right. We
like,
proudly display our scars.
yeah, yeah, and it's like, okay, we need to move on. And I think this for me has been, and again, I have my process, because the whole idea of stories, words, my moon is in Gemini, maybe that's why. um the whole idea of words and stories is how things come alive for me. So by using the asteroids and their stories and looking at that, that's how I determine what I'm going to be working on. I mean, I also have, symbols, that I work with, like they talk about, a lot of astrologers talk about the Sabian symbols, but I have an author, John Sandback, who's got four different, the Chandra, the Pleiadian, Omega, and there's one other one, symbols. So there's a lot of words that I can create the story. But then again, and what I do is at every PowerPoint, there's a ritual that I do, whether it's just sitting, lighting the candles, lighting the incense, going into your sacred space and journaling. Okay, this is what's going on in my life, and honoring, honoring the balance that you want to bring into your life. And everybody, you've got to find your own way. My way is the best for me, but not necessarily for
Right.
you. And that's, the template, using the template of this of the Inanna journey. I think part of me has lost some of the Inanna stuff, because I've recognized in listening to and researching this to talk to you today, it's like, oh, I've forgotten that,
Right.
because I've just gotten into the process, which is not as important to me anymore. It's the process and honoring the divine, the sacred feminine, the divine feminine, honoring that in whatever way we do it. But this is a process that I can allow myself, because the Saturnian part of us, it's we got to follow a path, you got to do it this way, you got to do it right. And that's what this allows me to do.
Okay. So listening to you talk about this, I guess my final question before we get to the three questions at the end, because you've listened to the show, so you know what they are.
Yeah.
Which isn't really fair, because then you've had some time to think about it.
But I know. I
know. So this process that you have designed, do you have plans to document that, what that looks like, and offer it to others?
Plans, yes. I've been thinking about it for many years. I think the process of you inviting me here is kickstarted it so that I can.
Okay. So where were we? Oh, yes. Is this a process you're going to make available to everyone? You said coming on the podcast. So go from there.
Yeah, I've started redoing my website, so at least I can have it on the website. I've wanted to put it out as a book for an upcoming Venus cycle, so that you could go through and, okay, these are the energies that are at each point. I've played with a lot of ideas. It's just getting myself to do it.
I understand that.
It's a huge in-depth process. I spent 3 months this last winter gathering all the data for the upcoming cycle. And that's, I got to that point and then I just, so it's,
Right.
I'm hoping to at least have some of this on my website,
Okay.
which is razena.net. I'm I'm working on it. I'm working
Okay.
on it. It's a
That's
process.
good.
And
I mean, I think it's something that people could benefit from, and shadow work is all the rage right now anyway. Everybody's
yeah,
doing it.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. And there are a lot of, there are several astrologers out there that use the Venus cycle as, they have workshops and stuff that they do. Kaylin Castal of who was with the shamanic, one of the co-founders of the Shamanic Astrology Mystery School. She has, at her Venus Alchemy site, she has stuff, and there's others out there too. So it's not like there's a huge void, but again, I do it a little differently, just because
right.
that's me. But yeah, we'll see how it goes. We'll see. Hopefully, I can get it up and running.
Well, hopefully, if the Church of the Goddess becomes a thing, right? Because it's still not quite a thing yet, but as it becomes a thing, uh, I do want to, what's the word I'm looking for? I do want to, the word is escaping me, but connect with other practitioners of various things to create workshops that we can then offer
Yeah,
through the church.
yeah,
Um,
that'd be cool.
collaborate with. That's the word that
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was escaping me. Collaborations. So we'll have to talk more about that. Okay. We've reached the point in the episode where you get to answer the 3 questions that you
Okay.
prepared for in advance, which isn't as
Yeah,
fun. But
yeah.
so tell me something about yourself that other people would be surprised to learn,
Um,
especially
that one, that
people
one
that
was a
know you.
difficult one to come up with, but I think, um, yeah, I didn't have an answer. My my answer was going to be, I have pulled away from everyone outside in my outside world, and it has nothing to do with them. It only has to do with me because, but then something that they'd be surprised to learn is that I've become addicted to reading romance novels. Someone who didn't like romance novels, and
That
since
is a
I've
good
retired, I'm
answer.
reading romance novels. So that probably would be the biggest.
Okay, that is a good, fun answer.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Um, Mine always, I used to always have the same answer, but I think my answer is going to become, my wife and I are going to start watching The Jewish Matchmaker as our guilty pleasure.
Oh. I'm not quite up to that point yet. Yeah.
I hate reality
Romance
shows,
novels,
but
it's,
that just looks fascinating
yeah.
because there was a character on another show that we watched who that's what she did. She was a Jewish matchmaker. The mother, in The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, that's what she does. So now there's this reality show out about Jewish matchmaking, and I don't know, it just seems fun and fascinating and trash TV. So,
Yeah.
which we don't usually watch.
Yeah.
Um,
Cool.
anyway, so that's my current fun fact.
Okay.
So, what is your current favorite movie or television series?
Okay. Well, I'm a huge RuPaul fan. That's something that has recently caught my eye, and I've binged watched that for the last year or so. But I had a movie that came on recently that I absolutely loved, and it's called 3,000 Years of Longing. And Tilda Swinton and Idris Elba are,
Idris Alba. Oh, I love
yeah.
both of them.
And it's about a professor of mythology and storytelling. I think they called her a storyologist. And she goes to some Turkish bazaar or something and finds a bottle and ends up releasing a jinn. And she knows enough that the difficulties of making the three wishes, and she's read enough stories, she knows what happens with the three wishes, so she holds off making the wishes. And the story that unfolds is, and I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. So
Okay.
that's the it's become my favorite movie. I'm going to have to sit down and watch it again because there's depth there of the stories behind the stories. So that's cool. 3,000 Years of Longing.
Okay. If you like the unfolding of stories, for the longest time, my favorite movie, I guess it still is, my favorite movie is a movie called The Red Violin that has a story that has several stories within a story.
Yeah, I think I've seen
And
it.
watching the story of the violin unfold and its
Yeah.
history and where it's been and who its owners have been.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I love that movie.
I
I don't know why I'm sharing my answers with you. Nobody asked me to. So I thought it was time, I guess. I don't
There you
know.
go. There you go.
Yes, people wonder. It's not like anybody's writing into the show being like, you always ask these questions. What are your answers?
Yeah.
Okay. And then the final question, if your life were a movie, what would be the theme song on the soundtrack of your life?
There's two. There's two that I might use. The first one is nobody would understand but me. The Human by Killer.
Okay.
Are we human or are we dancing? That to me, with the interplay of that, are we human or are we dancer? What are we really?
Yeah.
That one for the longest time was like my favorite song. But recently I had another song that came up that's called Savage Daughter. And it's, I am my mother's savage daughter, the one who runs barefoot, cursing sharp stones. I will not cut my hair. I will not lower my voice. My mother's child is a savage. She looks for her omens in the colors of stones, in the faces of cats, in the falling of feathers, in the dancing of fire, in the curve of old bones. And I really,
Who's the artist?
this particular, there's a couple people that sing it, but this is Katerina Shelahova. I
Okay.
came and Pandora, because I, have Pandora and it randomly picks things. And when I heard that song, probably about 2 months ago, I'm like, oh, is that my song? I am my mother's daughter. Is it my mother or is it the goddess mother? There's different ways to interpret that. So
Right.
it's a very powerful song. But yeah, she sings heathen songs by the light of the moon and watches the stars and renames the planets. That's me. That's me, working, telling the stories of the asteroids and working that kind of stuff. So
Perfect.
that would be a good song for me.
All right.
My current incarnation. So this is fun. This is fun. This
Fun,
is
right? We'll do it again because there's so much to astrology. I keep trying to get my one of my best friends, that astrologer who's my personal astrologer, right? She always talks to me about my chart. Um, and we've known each other for 20 years, and she knows that I don't understand any of this stuff. And every now and then I'll get a random text at 3 in the morning on a Wednesday, like, Kelly, oh my God, Jupiter is conjunct with your blah 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 in your eighth house. And I always text her back and I'm like, I don't know what any of this means. You're gonna have to explain it to me. And then the next texts start rolling in. But I always have to ask.
Yeah, I've
'Cause she
gotten to
always
the
says
point.
it like I know.
I have a lot of friends like that. And I've gotten to the point where I don't say it's Jupiter in the eighth house of this. I just say, you know what? This is the energy you need to be working with, because it's like, otherwise they're like, huh?
Right. Well, she'll eventually get to that part.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she tells me that just the process of chart readings is that every time she looks at it, she sees something new.
And it's almost it's oracular. I think it's that what you need to know at that point is what pops out.
Right.
I think I found, because I'll look at somebody's chart and then come back a year later and go, why didn't I see that before? Why,
Right.
and it wasn't pertinent, or something at that time. So even my own chart, I do that.
Right.
I have I have Juno square Venus, and I never realized
Right.
exactly square, and issues with women. Okay, you know,
Yeah, that's all
yeah,
over my chart too.
yeah. But anyway,
Um,
get me going.
okay, so when I say goodbye, screen's gonna go blank. You know the deal with Zoom, but I will be in
Okay,
touch. Well, I'll be in touch. I was gonna say I'll be in touch once I have the episode edited and it's ready to go, but I'm probably gonna talk to you before then. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll try to get you all the names of everybody I mentioned.
yes, I think people like it when we have a list
Websites.
of resources in the show notes so that they can always learn more.
Right.
And when I go through the video to edit, which I don't edit a lot, but I'll try and make a list of, oh, we talked about this thing and we talked about this author and we talked about this book. So, all right. Well, thank you for coming on the show. I wanted to have an astrology episode for a long time, and I think we'll probably do another episode. And I've been trying to talk Rachel and my friend Rachel to come into the show for like a year. And this season, I started with the panel episodes of having more than one person on at a time. So maybe I can get the two of you
That'd
uh,
be cool.
together. That would be really cool. So,
Yeah, yeah.
all
Cool.
right. Well,
Thanks for having me.
yes, if you're a summer sun person, go enjoy that. I'm not. I will be hiding indoors, waiting for fall
Yeah,
to
yeah.
finally
Next week.
arrive.
Next week.
Next week. Yeah, we'll see. I don't trust the forecast.
Yeah,
Like that's what it says, but that could change at any
yeah,
moment. I think they just make this shit up. I really do.
yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you again. I will be in touch, but until then, may the love and the peace of the goddess be with you.
Thank you.
Talk soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching The Girlfriend God on YouTube. If you enjoy this podcast, the best way you can support it is to like it, follow it, leave comments on the page, rate it, review it, share it with your friends. But most of all, subscribe to this channel. And if you want more of The Girlfriend God, you can find The Girlfriend God on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Thanks again for watching.